dear scholars, academicians, doctors, graduate and undergraduate students, and all of you who are following us on the internet. Welcome to the 10th UBT International Conference with a focus on resilience, innovation, and sustainability. The main perspective of the conference is to connect scientists and practitioners from different disciplines in the same place and make them be aware of the recent advancements in different research fields and provide them with a unique environment to share their experiences. It is also the place to support the new academic staff for doing research and publish their work in international standard level. I would like to talk about the agenda of the day. We'll have welcome speeches and keynote speeches today, and we'll start with 2 welcomes. The first welcome speech is going to be given by Professor Dr. Edmond Hairizi. Please, to the stage.
Thank you very much, Professor Hassan. Dear participants, physically and virtually, allow me that on behalf of UBT to welcome you to the 10th International Conference of Science, Technology, Business, and Innovation. If you consider, I will continue in the first phase in Albanian language because we have today the public television and we wanted as to express our introduction as in Albanian. Të nderuar pjesëmarrës, prezent dhe të gjithë ju në mënyrë virtuale, përfaqësues të institucioneve të Republikës Kosovës, përfaqësues të institucioneve ndërkombëtare, përfaqësues të universiteteve partnere, të nderuar profesor, student, përfaqësues të industrisë dhe komunitetit të palëve të interesit që kanë interes në fushën e shkencës, teknologjisë, biznesit dhe inovacionit, më lejoni që t'ju dëshiroj mirëseardhjen në konferencën e 10 ndërkombëtare të UBT-s, të ashtu quajtur konferenca ndërkombëtare për shkencë, teknologji, biznes dhe inovacion këtu në Parkun Shkencor dhe Teknologjik të UBT-s. Kjo konferencë të jetë e rëndësishme shkencore me karakter ndërkombëtar do të nxjerrë në pa kontributin e jashtëzakonshëm të shkencëtarëve, studiuesve e hulumtuesve nga vende të ndryshme të botës, të cilat janë sot këtu me ne, fizikisht e në formë virtuale për të prezantuar punimet e tyre shkencore. Kjo konferencë ka edhe jubileumin e 10 të vetën që organizohet tash me 10 vite, por njëkohësisht është edhe në nëmbredhen e 20 vjetorit të themelimit të UBT-s. Dhe me këtë krijon një moment unik dhe të shumë të rëndësishëm për neve në një periudhë ndoshta të shkurtë historike në aspektin universitar, po për neve një periudhë mjaft e gjatë dhe mjaft interesante në zhvillimin ton, i cili në fakt lidhet edhe me ndërtimin dhe krijimin e shtetit të ri të Kosovës. Nëse i bëjmë tash një vështrim të listës së prezantimeve shkencore të planifikuara që të prezantohen këto 2 ditë të konferencës, ju do të shihni se ka një diversitet të mahnitshëm të punimeve e hulumtimeve ka 24 fusha të ndryshme të studimit. Këtu i kom listu fushat të cilat i kemi nda si konferencat veçanta, duke fillu nga konferenca ndërkombëtare për shkenca kompjuterike dhe inxhinierinë e komunikimit, mandej menaxhment, biznes dhe ekonomi, mekatronik, inxhinierie sisteme dhe robotik, inxhinieria e energjisë eficiente, sistemet e informacionit dhe siguria, arkitekturë dhe planifikim hapësinor, inxhinieria ndërtimit, infrastruktura dhe mjedisi, shkencat juridike, shkencat politike, gazetaria, mediat dhe komunikimi, agrikultura, shkencat e ushqimit dhe bioteknologjia, shkencat farmaceutike dhe shkencat e natyres, dizajni i integruar, psikologjia, edukimi dhe zhvillimi, moda, muzik moderne dhe produksion audio, art and media digitale, stomatologji, mjekësi e aplikuar dhe infermieri, mjekësi ku përfshin infermieri dhe shkencat teknike mjekësore, radiologji dhe anesteziologji, sport, gjuhë dhe kulturë dhe studime të sigurisë. Domethënë është një Diversitet vetëm i konferencave mund të jetë një diversitet shumë unik të cilën ne e krijojmë me këtë konferencë ndërkombëtare, e mandej me këtë vendosen edhe punime specifike me një program të jetë pasur që prek secilën sferë të jetës e me të cilën ne përballemi çdo ditë. Kemi krijuar një program gjithëpërfshirës dhe tërheqës, besoj, i cili ka zgjuar një interesim mjaft të madh kudo në botë dhe nëpërmes kësaj kemi arritur që sot në këtë konferencë, që sapo e hapëm, të kemi 600 punime shkencore, e ku do të kemi 700 folës dhe dikun 1000 hulumtues. Dhe asaj i shtohet mandej edhe 3000 pjesëmarrës fizik dhe virtual që do të jenë pjesë e kësaj konference. Me këtë vëllim themi apo me këtë numër ne krijojmë një prej organizimeve më të mëdha shkencore në Ballkanin Perëndimor dhe jo vetëm në Kosovë, për çka unë dua t'i falenderoj qysh tani të gjithë autorët të cilët kanë shprehë dhe kanë dhënë kontributin e tyre me punimet, e natyrisht gjithë komitetin organizativ dhe shkencor të konferencës ndërkombëtare për krijimin e një ambienti të tillë për të mundësuar një shkëmbim të tillë të përvojën mes shkencëtarëve, profesionistëve dhe fushave ndërdisiplinare. Ne kemi dashur që gjithë autorët dhe shkencëtarët të fokusohen në atë se çfarë mund të bëjmë më mirë për cilëtetin e jetës, si mund të rriten vendet e punës, si mund të rritet konkurrueshmëria, digitalizimi, zhvillimi qëndrueshëm, siguria dhe gjitha komponentet e asaj që ne e quajmë në përgjithësi si cilëtet i jetës si dhe vlerat humane njerëzore. Dhe gjitha këtu i kemi vendosur në një ombrellë të përbashkët me termin Resilience, Innovation and Sustainable Development, rezilienca, inovacioni dhe zhvillimet e qëndrueshme. Do thotë ne jetojmë në një dekadë të modelit të qëndrueshëm të kombeve bashkuara, ku të gjitha institucionet edhe universitetet janë ka mundohen të krijojnë modele inovative, modele të reja për të krijuar një jetëgjatësi dhe një stabilitet sa më të madh edhe planetit edhe njerëzve, për dhe të kemi një qëndrueshmëri të mirë ekonomike. Mendoj që UBT-ja në këto 20 vite ka kontribuar mjaft shumë si një institucion që ne e quajmë institucion ose një term anglisht që quajmë Entrepreneurial Innovation Based Ecosystem University, një ndërlidhje e një ekosistem, një interdisciplinaritet, një qasje sistemore për të kontribuar në këto pika të rëndësishme që sot kërkohen nga universitetet. Do të thonë universitetet sot ju dini nuk është vetëm çështje edukimit, nuk është vetëm çështje shkencës, është edhe pjesa e një kërkese që pritet nga ne, zgjidhja problemeve të shoqërisë me të cilën UBT-ja besoj ka dhënë dhe po jep një kontribut të madh në këtë drejtim në këto 20 vitet e fundit. Këtë vit kemi 20 vjetorin e themelimit dhe kemi dhënë premtimin që deri në fund të vitit i kemi 20 inovacione të reja të implementuara vetëm në vitin 2021. Dhe besoj që kjo është duke u plotësuar dhe besoj në fund të vitit do të kemi mundësi ti prezantojmë dhe ti kompletojmë ato premtimet tona të dhëna për Kosovën edhe për globin në përgjithësi. Megjithatë, në këtë vit ne kemi për hir të 20 vjetorit kemi bërë dhe një konfirmim, një konfrontim me kriteret ndërkombëtare, me rankimet botërore. Kemi aplikuar në disa prej rankimeve botërore për të pasur ku jemi ne nga këndvështrimi i palëve treta dhe nga krahasimi me universitetet tjera. Dhe fatmirësisht rezultatet kanë dalë shumë pozitive për neve dhe na kanë dhënë edhe një motivim, edhe një kurajo që modeli jon, puna jon, angazhimi jon është në rrugën e duhur. Kisha filluar në kuadër tyre arritjeve të përmendi suksesin e treguar në fund me rankimin të asociuar World University with Real Impact, WUR, ku UBT është vlerësuar krahas me universitete prestigjioze në 100 universitetet më të mira në botë. Ka qenë një arritje shumë e madhe dhe një konfirmim që impakti jon në shoqëri është shumë i madh dhe është vërtet i vlerësuar në tërë botën. Këtë vit ne kemi hyrë edhe në antarësimet e asociacioneve të universiteteve botërore ose shoqatave të universiteteve që konfirmojnë seriozitetin e punës sonë. Po filloj prej Organizatës Evropiane të Universiteteve, EUA, që është njëri prej institucioneve më prestigjioze që konfirmon një ombrellë të frymës se ka duhet jenë universitetet dhe cilat universitete konfirmojnë punën e atyre që themi një rol model për të ardhmen. përveç edhe antarësimeve tjera në shoqata specifike të fakulteteve, në shoqata regionale, edhe në shoqata ndërkombëtare për të cilat nuk isha ndalë më shumë. Po ashtu në Time Higher Education si vjet tek rankimi i universiteteve për impaktin e tyre në zhvillimin e qëndrueshëm UBT ka hyrë në 500 universitetet më të mira në botë. Do të thonë, ju e dini rankimet që i bojmë në 500 universitetet, ne kemi hyrë mu në mesin e atyre më të mirave nga një institucion prestigjioz i rankimit. Dhe në disa komponente apo nën komponente të këtij rankimi jemi edhe në pozitën e 200, edhe në pozitat e 300 e kështu me radhë. Po vetë hyrja në 500 ka qenë edhe një ëndër jona, edhe si Kosovë, edhe si UBT, që edhe Kosova të ketë universitetet e vetat, institucionet arsimit vetat në këtë ombrell të këtyre rankimeve. Po ashtu kemi edhe rankime tjera në Positive Impact Rating, kemi dalë në pozitat më të larta në botë, krahas shkollave më prestigjioze të biznesit dhe menaxhmentit. Do të thonë, disa prej rezultateve na konfirmojnë apo na kanë konfirmuar një momentum që jo vetëm që ne po i shohim rezultatet fatmirësisht gjithherë në rritje këtyre 20 viteve, po edhe një pozicionim i joni në arenën ndërkombëtare dhe me këtë dua t'i falenderoj prapë të gjithë kontribuesit, stafin e UBT-s, partnerët e UBT-s dhe gjithë palë tjera të cilat në mënyrë direkte apo indirekte kanë kontribuar në këtë pjesë. Megjithatë, ne po vazhdojmë ta përmbyllim ciklin tonë të një qendre unike të ashtuquajtur Place-Based Innovation Ecosystem në parkun tonë shkencore teknologjik, ku jemi të ndërtu një qytet të vogël që quhet Smart City, UBT Smart City, me gjitha funksionet e jetës, duke filluar nga aspekti shëndetësor, i banimit, i ushqimit, i infrastrukturës, gjitha komponentet të cilat krijojnë një, mendoj, model të mirë edhe eksperimental për shkencëtarët dhe studios për studentët, njëkohësisht edhe një lloj eksperimenti apo lloj modeli për qytetet e Kosovës dhe për të tjerë se si ka mundësi një region, një komponente vogël të jetë vetë qëndrueshme me komponente inovative dhe me gjitha ato që sot vinë nga puna shkencore, nga trendet dhe nga konfirmimet që janë. Do të thjesht po krijojmë edhe modele të tilla duke i konfirmuar rezultatet shkencore, konfirmimet e modeleve teorike në mënyrë që ato të reprezentojnë dhe mandej të zhvillohen edhe me tutje. Dhe për këtë arsye, ju e keni pasi vjetë, po flas direkt me stafin dhe me partnerët që kanë qenë këtu, që kemi punu komponentet të shumta, kemi shtu një fabrikë të mençur, kemi vazhdu pjesën e gjelbërt, kemi rrit infrastrukturën e poliklinikës, kemi vendos për herë të parë në region gjeneratën e 5 të telekomit, 5G University Campus, dhe sfundit, si që keni pa edhe të Facebooku edhe të Microsoft edhe të gjitha kompanit jemi të folë për një koncept të metaverses, dhe me thënë një koncept të një ndije të integrume ku pjesa digitale, pjesa e mençur dhe pjesa virtuale bashkohen, bashkë me dijen dhe krijojnë kështu një qasje të retë dhe një pasqyrë dhe një funksion tjetër që se kemi pas deri tash. Këtu UBT-ja nuk ka mbet mbrapa, përkundrazi është pjesë e leadershipit në këtë metavers të dijes, sepse kemi kriju qendrën më të madhe të teknologjisë bazuar në realitetin virtual dhe në augmented reality, me cilën ne mundsojmë një ndërlidhje të realitetit me virtualitetin dhe krijohen mundësi treja të qasjes, perceptimit, akseptimit dhe unë mendoj shumë që jemi ashtu kontribus të këtij zhvillimi në botë. Dhe jo rastisht në vitin e kaluar kemi marrë çmimin e parë botëror në vendosjen e teknologjisë Classroom 3.0 në botë. Do thotë në një konkurrueshmëri me universitete prestigjioze, ne kemi marrë medaljen e parë, çmimin e parë apo medaljen e artë apo sido që ta quani në këtë këndvështrim. Do thotë nuk jemi pikrisht në rrethana të njëjta të zhvillimit dhe unë mendoj kjo është shumë e rëndësishme që tri tonë edhe vendi ynë dhe shkencëtarët tonë mos të kenë një inferioritet apo një vonesë kohore në momentet e zhvillimit dhe transformimit që po ndodhin sot në botë, po të jemi bashkë me ta. Do thotë, unë mendoj që gjitha këto tema që po i flasim në umbrellën e reziliencës, sepse sot reziliencën e kemi si komponent të rëndësishëm, siç e kemi rastin me Covidin, ngritja, ringritja, adaptimi, rrethanat e reja të cilat presim të kemi edhe më shpesh gjanat e tilla, jo me dëshiren tonë, po për shkak se ndoshta edhe si njerëzim kemi kontribu pak që të shkojmë në këtu ekstremet, qoftë ambientit, qoftë të gjendjeve të qëndrueshme, atëherë ne duhet të përgatitemi për gjëra të tilla. Zhvillimi qëndrueshëm mbetet deri në 2030 një prej modeleve që besojmë na ndihmon që ta ndalim trendin negativ të qëndrueshmërisë së planetit dhe ne duhet patjetër gjithë bashku të kontribuojmë në hulumtime, në gjetjen e modeleve për zhvillimin e qëndrueshëm dhe natyrisht ne ende besojmë shumë që ka gjëra të paditura dhe të papara, unknown and invisible, të cilat ne duhet t'i trajtojmë në një qasje inovative për gjetë dhe për t'i fut në implementim, sepse ju po e shihni që resurset natyrore po harxhohen, ju po e shihni që temperatura po ngritet, ju po e shihni që kemi mungesë të ushqimit, ju po e shihni që kemi diversitet të ndryshme të problemeve, mirë po ne ende mbesim optimistë, sidomos institucionet akademike, që përmes inovacionit, përmes qasjeve kreative, hulumtimeve, gjetjeve të reja, ne të ndrojmë lakoren e rrugtimit dhe të shkojmë ka inovacionit dhe për këtë arsye inovacioni mbetet për u bërë pjesa e kryesore e punës dhe angazhimit tonë. Do të thënë jo vetëm hulumtim, po edhe implementim, edhe impact, do thotë edhe inovacion. Prandaj unë i falenderoj gjithë autorët për këtë kontribut të tyre shkencor. Falenderoj gjithë edhe një herë komitetin organizativ shkencor, sepse është një punë e madhe për të komunikuar me autorët, për të ndajtur në kontakt. Çka është e mira se ne si vetë kemi dikon 20% të rritjes së autorëve ndërkombëtar. Kjo krijon një rritje të vizibilitetit të pozicionit ndërkombëtar të kësaj konference shkencore dhe me këtë rast ne krijojmë një ambient të mirë me pyetjen pse jo në Kosovë të gjëra të mira, të reja, proaktive, inovative të ndodhen. Dhe unë mendoj se me këtë vëllim edhe me këtë qasje ne kemi arritur edhe si vjet jemi. Do të jemi edhe me rritje të punime nga viti kaluar, kemi edhe rritje të autorëve ndërkombëtar, edhe natyrisht edhe një rritje më të madhe të konferencave edhe të pjesëmarrësve. Kështu që ju falenderoj shumë gjithëve, ju dëshiroj sukses në këto 2 ditë dhe do të bëjmë së bashku që ta krijojmë një forum që jo vetëm pjesa e prezantimit dhe publikimit punimeve që ndodhin andej, të jetë edhe një komunikim ndërdisiplinar apo transdisiplinar në mes shkencëtarëve profesionistëve. Ju falenderoj shumë edhe ju dëshiroj sukses. Thank you very much. For international participants and authors, I want to thank you on behalf of UBT for your contribution. Together with you and with all the colleagues here in Kosovo and the region, we create a very good international environment and kind of transdisciplinarity approach conference where we have focused on resilience, innovation, and sustainable development. I think those are the main chapters, umbrellas, where any kind, any way, any subject can contribute in this direction where everybody is interested in order to increase the quality of life, competitiveness, job creation, growth, digitalization, innovation, security, and many other aspects that we are interested to present. But I think with these 24 sub-conferences, we are reaching quite a very good knowledge convergence, which linked directly with the knowledge revolution where we are living. So I think this is also why we have to consider this interdisciplinarity as a part. 10th year's anniversary of conference is linked also with 20th anniversary of UBT Foundation. So it's really a momentum for us to reflect where we are, what we did in 20 years, and how we can contribute much more. We trying to complete till end of the year a kind of model, so-called entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem based university in a place-based small-scale innovation ecosystem. Things that we are talking in the European Union, we are talking in a global level, and we try as in Kosovo, as a small scale, to represent, to confirm that those achievements, those let's say trends are as can be implemented in countries in transition like Kosovo, and UBT with a number of subjects areas and with the staff and partnership, I think can and we are trying to contribute. So first we create an interesting infrastructure to establish an environment for scientists and students to have good education and be able to publish new knowledge, but in the same time, a small-scale innovation in an area that to be as an experimental model or a role model or a comparison model for cities, for stakeholders here in the region and international. So we have established more factories here. We have established healthcare institution more. We have established more green areas and very much focused on digitalization. So with establishing on 5G university campus here, supercomputers, artificial intelligence, and especially in line with those metaverse trends on linked reality with virtuality, we succeed to establish the largest virtual and augmented reality center in Western Balkan. And I think one of the largest globally, because last year we succeed to have the largest number of implementation of virtual reality components in education and also in the development in a comparison in a global level. So I think creating environment, creating a good partnership, which is very important, and I have to thank all partners, international professors, institutions, universities, who has contributed and are contributing to enrich internationalization of Kosovo education and research, but also to support UBT development based on best practice and international standards. So again, thank you all for your presence, and I wish you all the best for today and tomorrow for this interesting conference with about 600 papers, close to 1,000 authors. And then we have as a participants who will not present, but they will be present here, almost 3,000 virtual participants. So this is taking consideration the COVID situation, taking consideration very difficulties for organization. I think it's a good trend. It's 20% more than last year, and the good message is a positive attitude for us to not to stop, but to move forward. And another part is as a good for us in this the 10th years anniversary of this conference. So thank you all and all the best. Maybe I forget to say that we just published the 20 years anniversary book of UBT. We wanted to give you then I think it's quite interesting. Thank you.
Professor Dr. Harizi, being the founder, president, and the rector of the University for Business and Technology, thank you very much for your speech. Our next guest is from Hungary, Dr. János Joaya. He's the Professor Dr. János Joaya is the full member of Hungarian Academy of Science, the former rector of Budapest University of Technology and Economics, founding partner of BME UBT Joint Transformative Research Center in Budapest. The floor is yours. Thank you. Please turn on your microphone, Doctor. Professor, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you. We really cannot hear you. Okay, we'll wait a little bit. Professor, if you let us, we would like to continue with the upcoming professor, then we can get back to you. Is it okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. The next speaker, our first keynote speaker, is going to be Professor Reinhard Heinisch. He's the professor of comparative Austrian politics at the Department of Political Science and Sociology at the University of Salzburg. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll try to rely on my voice, not technology, which is an advantage these days. And I want to thank you and commend you for your leadership and for having created a university. And we are very delighted to be a partner in a joint master's program that we have. My name is Reinhard Heinisch. I came to Europe about 10 years ago and had the task of building an American department at the University of Salzburg, which was a very sleepy regional university. And I think we share some of the difficulties. Rather than building something from scratch, the challenge was to take a department and shake it up and change it in a way. And we're delighted that some of your students are now part of that process, and very happy that you keep sending us some really wonderful students, and we're quite impressed with what you've done here. And given that the University of Salzburg is 600 years old and you're 20 years old, and it looks very impressive. So congratulations to all of you, and also given the challenges. I'm not going to give you a paper. I think there's going to be enough papers here anyway, but I do want to talk about my research a little bit, and sort of and how this sort of unfolded. I was working many years ago in a different lifetime for the U.S. State Department, and we prepared ambassadors, American ambassadors, to Germany and Austria. And American ambassadors, before they get confirmed, they have to pass hearings in Congress, and they bring in professors from universities to work with these ambassadors. And my dad is Austrian, my mother's American, and I grew up partly in Austria, partly in the U.S. But I was an Austria specialist, but nobody's interested in Austria. Who studies Austria? So when you, and that's, I think, important lessons for you. If you come from a small country and you want to be noticed in your research, you have to connect your work, your country, to something bigger. You can't just make it about Austria, but you have to make it about what is Austria an example of, or what is this an example of. So you connect yourself, you build a network. And so I was brought in, and the question was, well, there is this guy in Austria. He's a radical right leader who has influence in Germany, but he's affecting things that are happening in other European countries. Can you tell us about it? I have no idea. I've worked on labor markets before, and I thought I'd go to Austria and follow this guy around and run for elections. And he was a very kind of new kind of politician. He was good looking, he was dashing. I remember I was so impressed. He had a big truck going around, and he had his suits in refrigerators. And he always it was a hot day, he put a fresh suit on. It was really interesting. And he was very radical. He was like a Donald Trump 20 years before Donald Trump. And I thought, this is interesting. And I thought, wow, he's very different from all other politicians. Women loved him. He was good looking. They didn't know he was gay, but he was very good looking. He posed nude in magazines, and he was on familiar terms with everyone. But he had a very strong right-wing message. And there were others like him in Europe. There was a guy in the Netherlands and in France and in Italy, and I was beginning to be fascinated by this kind of politician. And then my university, University of Pittsburgh, I was a professor at that time at the University of Pittsburgh, we had a program in Bolivia. So we took students to Bolivia, a service learning program, and after I had written my book on this Austrian guy, a year later I happened to be in Bolivia with my students. And I noticed we were staying at this compound. There was a very colorful group of people having a workshop. And then they said, someone came up to me, our boss heard that there's an American professor here, he would like to meet him. And I met with him and I said, well, you know, this person is a lead of a Bolivian party. His name is Evo Morales, and he is founding a new party. And I would want to sit down and talk to him. And then I spent the evening, we talked, and he was very interesting. And I noticed all the parallels between this Austrian guy and this guy in Bolivia. And presto, suddenly they had a research agenda which covered me for the next 20 years, which was comparative populism. And we started pretty much research on this new phenomenon, the P word, populism, which now is everywhere. If you read newspapers in the US and in Europe, everyone is a populist. And everything is populist. And populist is like one of these terms, if you don't know what it is, you just call him populist. So for us, the challenge was, how do we measure it? How do we make it empirical? How can we find ways in which we can define the concept? And people like myself, we would go to conferences and would always apologize and say to people, you know, I work on something we can't really define. It's a really hard word, and people have a thousand definitions. But you know, in the end, slowly, there is ways in which you can define it. And we ended up working on populism, and it was sort of we then tried to sort of measure this. And the way we define populism, in a political sense, we consider populism an ideology, a set of ideas. And we distinguish populism from the word that is used in everyday language. Now, in the newspaper, a person is a populist when he simplifies things, uses popular language, and connects himself to people. You know, when we define populism, we say, okay, for us a populist is someone who talks about the people in the abstract, and the people are oppressed by the elites, and the elites are bad. And the people are here, the elites are corrupt there, and people have a black and white worldview, a binary worldview. And then we were able sort of to then look at political parties around Europe and around other countries, and then we could measure how many there are. And that's sort of how populism research got started, and building a data set. And I would argue that populism, ideological populism these days, is probably the most important challenge to liberal democracy that we have in Western Europe. Because populists are like Democrats. They're not against democracy. They're not authoritarian. They tell you the people are always right. How do you dare say anything against the people? The problem is the people are never individuals. The people are an abstraction. It's never exactly the person. In the US, and I love this, in America the term is the heartland. The good people live in the heartland. And that sounds great, but where exactly is the heartland? What's the first town of the heartland? And whenever you are in a world when we don't exactly know who we're talking about, and who the enemies are and who the good guys are, then it's challenging to know, okay, then we're in populist territory. But populists are very clever in sounding like they are true Democrats. They're completely in favor of the people, but they're also saying, we know exactly who the people are, and we know who is part of the people, who is not part of the people. And if you're not part of the people, then you're out of luck. But if you're part of the people, that's great. So this is sort of the way populists very skillfully talk, set the agenda. And, you know, Donald Trump is a great example of that, because that's sort of where I came from. Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania, is Trump country before there was Trump. I mean, it was very fertile ground. But populists are people who very cleverly convince you there's an evil elite, and there are good people, and the elite always takes the good people for a ride, and there's no way of compromising. And it's a very, very powerful message that sells really well. But populists are not anti-democratic, and populists are not authoritarian. So populists, as opposed to all other radical groups, normally extremists or anti-democratic and call for violence. Populists don't do that. They don't call for violence. But populists have a very powerful story to tell the people that the elites are taking them for a ride, they will change society, and that take you into the future where they were in the past. And that's a very powerful story to tell you, you'll get there tomorrow what you've lost yesterday. Because normally change is hard. If I, as a politician, tell you change is scary. People don't want change. People like what they know. Changing you is always bad, but you're more likely to go for change if they tell you you're going to be back there where everything was better, like yesterday. They asked Trump once, what was the year the US was great? Well, 1958, 1960, sort of. We go back to that. But that's sort of what we find interesting, why that is sort of, that's sort of the message that populists tell you. And then we ask the question, okay, why are they so successful? Where does it come from? And then there are sort of three big theories out there right now that are competing with each other. Empirically, for all three theories, big stories, we find evidence. One story by a famous American political scientist, Pippa Norrish, she says, well, this is happening now in Western Europe, in America, and in Western Europe, because too much liberalism. The world's become too liberal. It's a backlash to liberal. Everyone is green, everyone genders, everyone does all these things. People sick and tired of that, they want to go back. So it's the backlash to liberal. It's a rebellion of traditionalists to these values. Another famous American scholar and others, Hochschild, she followed Trump voters around and interviewed them in Louisiana and different parts. And she found out, she says, no, people are looking for a deep story, a deep narrative. And the narrative that people have is that if you work hard, you don't get ahead. Someone else comes in, some immigrant comes in, someone else takes advantage of you, and you get resentful. You wait in line, you wait your turn, and suddenly, zoom, zoom, someone moves ahead. That would be an explanation. And the more common explanation that we often use in the social sciences is that established parties don't deliver. A crisis of legitimacy of established parties. People get elected, but they don't deliver. So whenever you need that aspect of crisis, we can show trust declines. We've had financial crises, refugee crises, lots of COVID crises, where we saw established politicians, established governments fail. And as a result, people turn elsewhere. So that's sort of pretty much what we can show. So there is a demand for change. And we can measure the demand. We can measure that trust is declining in institutions. We can measure that trust is declining in established parties all across Europe and Scandinavia. And the irony is, and what was so puzzling for us, where would you expect populism to pop up first? You would think, okay, it's going to happen in a poor country where everything is bad. But what we find out, no, it happened in really rich countries. You know, in Sweden, in France, in Switzerland, in northern Italy, not southern Italy. In countries where you think they have it great, they have great democracy, it's very transparent, they have lots of money. Why did it happen there? But it was in many ways the people there, they're like the canary in the coal mine. They were the first to sense that the system wasn't delivering for them. And that we first saw those indications. And that was for us fascinating to study. Populism, by itself, it simply says the elites are bad, the people are, they're shitting on the people, and the world is black and white. But populism is a thin ideology. It doesn't have solutions. It doesn't tell you who is at fault, what to do, and why to do it. It needs to connect itself to existing ideas. Some populists take ideas from the right, other populists take ideas from the left. So a right-wing populist tells you, okay, who's to blame? The immigrants. A left-wing populist says, well, the rich. So there are different solutions and different stories, but we have left-wing and right-wing populists because in the left and right are the solutions the populists then provide in order to change society. We tend to have in Western Europe and Northern Europe populists on the right. In Southern Europe, we tend to have populists more on the left, and also in Latin America. For me, the striking insight that a person like Evo Morales, who is the head of a left-wing party in Bolivia, and as someone like Jörg Haider, who is the head of a right-wing party in Austria, are very similar, have a lot of things in common. Although one is in Bolivia, one is Austria, one is left, one is right. But they had a lot in common. They hated globalization, they were worried about elites, they hated the big cities, and they told average people that they're right and the elites are wrong. But people tend to have diffuse sentiments. They sort of know something is wrong, but people don't have a clear idea what's going on. So populists then provide the narrative. They activate, they take a diffuse idea, diffuse unhappiness into specific grievances and tell you this is their fault and these are the people at fault. We can measure that, we can study that, we can actually do experiments. We can do framing experiments, survey experiments. We can do surveys and we can see how this is done. I have an EU-funded project where we just study conspiracy theories related to COVID. And we, for example, found in our research that we asked people on 0 to 10, how affected are you in your health by COVID? And then we asked people, how affected are you in your economy, in your economic well-being by COVID? And we did this in Austria, a national sample. I have an and ironically, where we just study conspiracy theories survey related to COVID. What explains how and we, for example, found in our research a lot of different that we asked people on income, age, gender, all these demographic variables, ideology, whether they liked the government, they hated the government, who they voted for. And then we asked people, the factor that was most important was their answer to populism. We had a battery of questions that identified whether or not they were populist in their orientation, they hated the elites, they thought the powerful have all the power. That resonated the strongest. And to us, that was simply fascinating that something as biological as health resonated strongly, was strongly connected with a political attitude, with populism. So in that sense, it is very powerful. So in the end now, we're in a situation where we try to understand this phenomenon, and we try to understand the causes of this phenomenon. And now, I think after 20 years of populism research, we're trying to understand the effects. What does it do to Western societies? Where do we go as a result of that? And of course, we see evidence of that in Hungary, we see evidence of that in Poland, we see evidence of that in our own societies, in our countries. We see how the consensus is being shifted. We see how societies are being polarized. I mean, I barely recognize the US anymore. I barely recognize the US anymore in the sense that a country like the United States is now, as a result of that, so extremely polarized after essentially having a 20-year period where people on both sides are telling the other side that the others are not only dead wrong, but the other side is an enemy to their society. So let me conclude by saying that I think political scientists, social scientists can make an important contribution to understanding our societies. I think political scientists in all countries make these important contributions, and I think it is our fundamental task to try to explain and to understand society and to pass that on to our students. And with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and thank you for the invitation, and you have a great place here. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for the wonderful speech. We'll again try to contact Dr. Janos. Hello?
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, yes.
You can.
Yes. Yes, please.
You can.
Yes, we can hear you. Please, doctor.
Oh. Anyway, so this is really a kind of a Christmas present that the technology works for us. It was good yesterday, but now today it didn't seem to work. Anyway, we survived that. Anyway, let me start. Dear Honorable Rector Professor Haizizi, dear participants in presence or online. As Rector Emeritus of Budapest University of Technology and Economics and past President of the Hungarian Rectors Conference, let me greet you on the occasion of the 2 days international conference to celebrate the 20th anniversary of University for Business and Technology, Pristina, Kosovo, Southeast Europe, an important place in the past, present, and hopefully also in our common future. I'm very sad I could not be with you in person. Thanks for the invitation for a short talk by Professor Haizizi, Between Friends. Edmond, one of the most energetic rectors on the world I have ever met. We have got nearly a decade-long bilateral agreement between BME and UBT on doing joint research and education and be active internationally. Let me mention among the key persons in our evolving bilateral cooperation, Dr. Karo Inaj, who plays a kind of bridge between the institutions as head of European research collaboration at UBT and co-executive director of the Joint Transformative Research Center between Budapest University of Technology and Economics and the University for Business and Technology. 20 years anniversary of UBT, still young, but time to make an overview of all achieved so far. We in Budapest are in our 214th academic year, which is great, but you have to be innovational, etc., to maintain or even further develop your reputation. We have been doing that for more than 200 years. We have got some experience and we are more than ready to share what we have experienced so far. I am a hydraulic engineer by origin, and most of my academic activity was on hydrosciences. Frankly speaking, I'm just staying in Southeast Sicily for a week-long holiday, but heavily frightened by the so-called Medicane hurricane, experiencing under our climate change how extreme conditions we can have and have to safely survive. Join our forces, knowledge base, and come up with innovation also in that, preferably in university framework would be a way out of that, in which all the achievements can be straight transferred to the upcoming generation of engineers and businessmen. In fact, their training under the same university umbrella is a very fortunate coupling of modern time disciplines. I do believe that's what is just happening at UBT in Pristina under the vice rectorship of Professor Haizizi. critical infrastructure, including water, still speaking about my profession and experience, both protection against floods, hurricanes, but also safely supplying drinking water. These are the primary tasks. I just mentioned that we have a promising ongoing cooperation in that, focusing on subsurface water resources in Kosovo. At last, let me mention something personal and national, something historical. Kosovo, more exactly, Kosovo Polje, is an important site in the Hungarian history where our governor at that time, János Hunyadi, was sadly beaten by the Turkish in the middle of the 15th century. But had been a great victory at Belgrade in 1456, to celebrate of which the Pope at that time ordered the Christian world to ring the bells at noon, and it is still so. To finish off my speech, I guess, to join the European Union for you, Kosovo people in general, and the university in particular, sounds promising and will provide a lot of benefit. But in the long term, it is so mainly for countries with already powerful national institutions. The University for Business and Technology should be surely one of like that for Kosovo. Good luck for that, and thank you for all your attention. Bye.
Thank you for your speech, Doctor. We'll proceed with the former rector of University of Rome, Foro Italico, a biologist, Professor Dr. Paolo Parisi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rector. Thank you all. It has been a real pleasure to be invited. Not a surprise, because you've always been so kind to me. I've known you for 2 years, and every day I've been more and more amazed and admired at your energy, as others have said, at your vision. I thought, well, I have a long career, over 50 years of teaching in the universities worldwide, and it is rare to find someone who combines various things that are generally present occasionally in someone or the other, but combined in the same person, it's not so frequent. Vision, capability to envisage practical steps to realize this, energy to support this, and good luck. You had all of these, it seems. And when I look at the, oh, my slides are there. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't know really whether I should present slides or not. Actually, until 10 minutes ago before getting in, I had no slides, but then someone suggested that I should. So I quickly selected a few slides from my presentation tomorrow. This is not really needed. No, it's good because it shows you the complex university where I am, in Rome, where I've been located for several years, close to UBT, and the European Union in a center, which is in a way a symbol I have adopted for these kind of presentations, and something that, speaking of the European Union, has accompanied me for more than 2 decades. Okay, let me try then and focus on the subject I've mentioned there. I was asked to give a title, so I gave a title. To give some slides, I selected some. We'll see what it is about. Mainly, my interest here at UBT has been to be close to this interesting person, your rector here, and try to be part of the story and help as well as I could. And having been active myself, both on behalf of my own government and on behalf of the European Union in several areas, particularly in sports science, and, as it happens, in specific projects aimed on behalf of the European Union to disseminate, promote, and support the development of the Bologna process, that is the European reform undertaken 20 years ago, to revise the organization of the university, the methods of teaching, the relation between teaching and employment, all of these things that students have always been interested in, sometimes professors less. So this has been a real effort on the side of the European Union, and they have promoted and asked some people who had, like me, have been heavily involved in international relations and international projects, to try and disseminate the new reform in areas that were not part of the European Union, but neighboring areas. There is a family of projects called Tempus that is now being substituted, but that's been working for about 20 years. And with these projects, 4 of these actually over the years, each one 3 to 4 years long, we've been working, disseminating some of the reforms and some international programs in the Balkans, also in other areas, also in Northern Africa, in Egypt, where I've been active and so on, but this is another story. In the Balkans, the whole thing started in Albania, where I'm still related, and at some point a delegation from Kosovo came and they asked me, could we be part of the story? And I said, yeah, okay, with pleasure. I came, and I found the situation a little bit difficult. We're talking about almost 20 years ago. So when I came back to Kosovo, little more than 2 years ago, I was very surprised at seeing what I saw under Professor Risi's leadership at UBT. And when I think of what he has shown us half an hour ago, I'm even more and more impressed. What are we trying to do together? Yesterday I gave here the first introductory teaching of biology to our first students of a new course of studies at UBT. And this is an ongoing story, because UBT is always trying to widen its perspectives, the areas of action and so on. So the new one is sports science. Sports science meaning all kinds of leisure activities around the notion of sport in the widest possible way, involving, therefore, not only physical activity, but all kinds of exercise, including mental exercise, play, activities, and many other things like this. What's inside this? Why that? Why that? Well, we have a very serious situation to face. You see, I was not born a sports scientist. In my career, 50 years, I've been teaching biology, human biology, behavior genetics, growth and development, various biological disciplines in various Italian universities, the three state universities in Rome, in University of California, in several American universities, European universities, in India and so on, always sticking to basically biology and genetics. Then some 25 years ago and so on, for some reasons, I continued to teach at the Faculty of Medicine, but I started teaching also at the School of Sports Sciences. And my last 25 years or so, I focused increasingly in this area. That initially was extremely interesting from the research point of view, because particularly in the new area that is called epigenetics, that is what comes in addition to our DNA, to the genetic code, And we consider the genetic code as something that is there and there's nothing to do. If you have that gene, this is what it happens. And yet we find that it's not necessarily so, and that the so-called environment is not something outside, it's something that is a player. And when we speak of epigenetics, we imply what comes from the combination of these two things. Now, interestingly enough, physical exercise, sport performance, is a very interesting indicator in all this, and helps us understand how does it happen that the same gene can be translated, activated, translated, and eventually result in a different story in one patient or the other, in one person or the other, and so on. Some variability. I'm not saying that genes are not there, but I'm saying that there is a lot to do through the environment. And this is an interesting, extremely interesting story. So we started to work in that area, and because of my previous long-standing international activity, I was asked to develop projects. We developed joint projects in the European Bologna process. We set up a network of different universities in Austria, in Germany, in Holland, in Denmark, in several countries, and of course in Italy. And we addressed the main issues, and what was and is the main issue. Let me see if that works. Okay. The main issue is this. The main issue is that, whether we realize it or not, we are in a situation that is dramatically heading towards an almost total number of deaths because of living conditions, because of our lifestyle, whatever we understand through that term. By lifestyle, well, I'll show you a few more slides, but this is a picture you see. The graph you see there is how the health situation worldwide was about 15 years ago. And already at the time, the World Health Organization was warning everyone about what was happening. There is an incredible increase, steady increase, in lifestyle-related chronic disorders, from obesity to diabetes to cardiovascular diseases to tumors and so on. People normally don't understand. All of these are chronic disorders not related to infection, and they are all related to basic inflammation, inflammatory conditions, coming from internal problems coming from internal imbalance, internal lack or loss of homeostasis, of the capability to handle things. And in this way, I'm saying something new now, on which I'm starting to think and work in some way, and others are also. Interestingly enough, we are facing now something totally new, something people were not expecting. We were saying until 20 years ago, oh, we are over with infection, no longer infectious disorders. This is over. We are free from this, and now we die from tumors, from cardiovascular disorders, this and that. Yes and no. Because we have a return, and dramatic one, of infectious diseases. And the story I'd like to think about, I'm just trying to say just a few words about that, but the story is that even our response to infectious aggression is mediated by our internal status. This is not new, but it can become new if it goes side by side with inflammation. If I have an inflammatory state coming from my stress conditions, from the way I'm living, from the way I'm sleeping or not sleeping, I'm working or badly addressing the various issues in my life, well, that may help in getting one form or the other, or in just being resistant, as many people have and are in face of epidemics and so on. So that's a picture. So we start from here, and let me just quickly show you some of these slides that I will be, in an ordered way, show tomorrow, speaking about sports science. But this is for general public, general ideas. So this is a very famous slide showing a little bit what is going on. We have been living with this slide for the past 20 years. Every now and then I show it. But it's very imaginative and very clear in the message it conveys. And this is the message. Something went wrong. And it's still going wrong. It is not something that happened 50 years ago or so. It happens every single instant of our life. Now, this situation, why 75% of all deaths today are lifestyle related, is the ongoing situation, and this is increasing. It was not 75%, it was 50% when I started this, about 25 years ago, 20 years ago. And the major risk factors related to lifestyle include a number of issues, but to a very, very, very large extent, the lack of physical activity, the so-called sedentary behavior. This is the issue. That's a starting point again. This is also something we have been living for the past several years. That's the situation as we have it, and still have it notwithstanding COVID. You see that there is a decline, a dramatic decline of infectious diseases. Yes, now we have a resurgence of infectious diseases, but as I say, this is not totally independent of our general situation. Life expectancy continues to increase and will continue to increase whatever COVID does or doesn't. And the lifestyle is and the life expectancy is also increasing. So what happens? Now, let me see. These are some tenets, fundamental aspects that are directing biomedical research worldwide, particularly biomedical research related to physical activity. There have been several declarations by prominent international organizations. You see the World Health Organization that has played a very major role in promoting as much as possible physical activity protocols and so on for all ages, from childhood to the elderly, for all conditions, healthy or diseased, for disabled people, specific protocols for rehabilitation and cardiovascular disorder, and many other things. And at the same time, both the European Union and the United Nations, what happened? Okay. Have found needed to stress the value of educated physical activity and sport generally, and play activities and entertainment and what else, not only for the wellness, health, and long survival of the individual, but also to entertain good relations in society, to promote social well-being, to promote harmonious relation, integration, inclusion, to work in critical situations, earthquakes, crises, and so on, to promote the overcoming of conflict, to promote peace. We have had and followed very successfully Palestinian and Israeli students having periodical matches of football, enjoying greatly, become friends, and this was a very successful program of the Italian Ministry of Health for many years, and have been very happy to play a role. And many other things like that. So here you see an idea, just some pictures of the various possibilities, and there are many, many more. You can do all kind of activity in all conditions, even on a wheelchair. And there are many. These are some of the outcomes. My time is left, so it's finished, so we're over. But just to give an idea, because one says, okay, we study sport, it's nice, we have a nice time, but then what? I'm not an engineer, I'm not an architect, I will not be a businessman, and so on. What shall I do? There's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. We are happy in having several professions, and the European Union is playing a major role in that, trying to promote specific profiles in various directions. So one obvious is just teaching at school teachers, coaching in Olympic athletes and all kinds of coaching and trainers, but largely the health-related physical activity and a host of extraordinary applications in all areas of social and socio-economic development. From town planning to new architecture for open spaces to buildings and all kinds of things. But I'll stop here. There could be much more to say, but it will be for another time and for a specific context. So thank you again. My best compliments to you, Mr. Rector, and to everyone involved in this beautiful adventure. My best wishes, and take care.
Dear Professor Dr. Paolo Parisi, we know that you have a lot to say, and we'll be listening to you tomorrow in your specific session. Thank you very much. Traditionally, we tend to host experts from different departments. As previously mentioned in Dr. Hairizi's speech, that so far we have had a social scientist, a life scientist, let's say a health scientist, and thirdly we'll have a computer scientist, an engineer here, Dr. David Ortinau. He is both an academician in the sense that he has his PhD, but also he's a industry keynote speaker. He's a principal program manager at Microsoft, and this stage is yours, Doctor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I am actually not a doctor. My dad is a doctor. I wish I was a doctor, but I am somewhat of an expert. So I have a presentation prepared. I will share my screen. I'm not wearing a tie. I feel a little underdressed after watching the previous speaker, but nonetheless, I need the host to enable screen sharing. Is that possible in the Zoom meeting?
It is
Currently says that I cannot share my screen. I have ways around this if you can't.
Is it good?
Let me try now. Still says it's disabled, but let me just do this. Because I do a lot of presenting. So how about that? You can't see my face anymore, but you can see my slides. Are they backwards, though? They're not backwards. I can see that on the screen. All right, let's do this. And actually,
let's start with this, and we'll see if we can fix the other.
I can even put my little face on the screen. Look at that. This is, I work from St. Louis, Missouri, which is in the heart of the United States. And so while Microsoft is headquartered up by Seattle and Redmond, I do all of my work from down here. So I am very accustomed to presenting internationally and remotely. I am David Ortinau. I am a program manager at .NET, and I will describe a little bit about what a program manager does. But I've been working in technology for at least 24 years. This obviously needs to get updated every year. But my degree, my education is actually in English literature and in communication. So all of the computer science, all of the technology and programming that I have learned over the years has been self-taught. And so I ran my own company for about 10 years doing software development. During that time when I was running my own company, I actually got to visit Kosovo, and this is me, that's my reflection in the iPad there, flying a drone in Jakova. And I loved meeting the people there. I love all the people that I met while I was there. I spent a little time in Pristina, but most of the time down in Jakova. So Kosovo is near and dear to my heart, and I look forward to a time when I get to go back there. So let's, what I want to speak about is what is Microsoft doing for software and for software developers globally? And I won't necessarily be able to touch on the full breadth of what Microsoft is doing because, you know, we're huge and there are a lot of different developer segments and, you know, company markets and industries globally, and they don't all share the same needs and the same perspective and what makes them effective. But what is the unifying thing here is that our mission is to empower every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. And that is a very, very real thing. It's not just about bits and bytes. It's not just about what programming language or what operating system or whether you carry an iPhone or an Android phone. It's really about people and the impact that we make in this world. I joined Microsoft for this very reason personally, so that I could have that level of impact and influence to make the world really a better place. So a little bit about what I do as a program manager, and then I'm going to get into some of the technology things that Microsoft is doing within my division of Microsoft. So we use customer-driven iteration. There's a book down here in the corner, which you can see, called the Customer-Driven Playbook. And this is written by a couple of our actual doctors in our user research lab about how we can learn what best impacts and helps our customers and how we go about deciding what it is we're going to build. So I spend the majority of my time, literally just before I tuned into this, I was speaking to a team in France and across the US from a global company that has applications that run on Android, iOS, and on the desktop. And they have, you know, 10 plus years of technology investment, and they want to modernize it. They want to make sure that they're staying at the bleeding edge of technology. They're using Bluetooth and IoT. And so, you know, that's where I spend a lot of my time, is talking to those companies, both to the, you know, decision makers, those who are planning their strategies and their investments, as well as to the actual software developers who need to do the actual work and do it effectively and do it quickly so that you can get to market effectively and you know that you have a robust solution that is not going to fail. So I spend a lot of my time having those conversations, and this book kind of describes how we go about identifying who the customers are, what are the customer problems or opportunities, and then concepting what it is that we can do for them that would possibly improve that thing. So when we're making decisions about our roadmaps and our technology that we're going to then get on a big stage and announce to the world, it really is informed by actual companies, actual developers, and solving real world pain and, you know, creating opportunity for them as well. So it's not just something that we have concocted up in our mad scientist labs and we've decided that the world should adopt our way of doing things. It is very closely tied to real life. So what is the technology that we have that we primarily invest in to do this? .NET is what I want to introduce you to today. And with .NET, you can really build for anything. Desktop, web, cloud, mobile, gaming, all of this you see on the screen. With one technology stack, you can touch all of these with native experiences. But this isn't the only thing that Microsoft does. We also have investment in JavaScript and in Java itself. You know, we also run GitHub now, so we are very much into open source software, and that means a variety of languages and technologies. But for today, I will focus on .NET, and this is where you know, I get to spend my time, and this is my sandbox, my playground. So what is .NET? It's a unified developer platform. So it's not only languages, but it's a core base class library that allows you to interact with the devices and the things that you want to do. It's runtime, it's compilers, and then of course we have different pieces of the product depending on what you're wanting to build. So for example, if you're building websites, you may use the ASP.NET or the Blazor frameworks. But behind the scenes, the technology that all of those use is .NET. Where I spend the majority of my time is in the desktop and the mobile space, and .NET MAUI is the project that we're getting ready to launch in Q2 of next year. It's an evolution of technology that we've been using in the market for more than 10 years now, called Xamarin. And before that, it was called Mono, and it was born out of open source, born in a time when Microsoft was not investing in open source. Open source really is a new thing for Microsoft, relatively speaking, although we have now quickly become the world's largest open source maintainer and contributor. And that is obviously very exciting for us, since we came into Microsoft as Xamarin through an acquisition, and we were already kind of pioneering in that open source space. So when you're going to program in .NET, typically the thing you want to know is, what language am I going to use? So you're going to write typically in C#. This is the most common language, the more popular language in the .NET ecosystem that everybody is going to program with. And it's a very similar to JavaScript, C, C++, Java. We are now shipping C#10. Every year we create a new revision of the language with new language improvements, new simplifications, of course, new performance characteristics and that sort of thing. You can also use F#, which is a functional programming language. Functional programming has been around for quite a while. It's very common in the Elm architecture. If that rings any bells, you can Google that and check that out. It's a different way of thinking about things. And this is an interesting aspect of talking to developers from my perspective, is because you really get to learn and understand that not all of our brains don't all work the same way. And so on one hand, one language or one way of programming may make a whole lot more sense to one person than to another. One person can look at a block of C# and feel like it makes no sense to them. But then they can look at the F# block and they will feel completely at home, and it will map more closely to how their brain processes. But that's obviously not the only thing. Of course, it could map more closely to the problem domain that they're trying to solve. What we have certainly learned is that one language doesn't rule them all. It's good to be a polyglot, right? In terms of this, you're here listening to me and I'm speaking English. And more than likely, if you're in the room there, English may not be your first language. And then Visual Basic. Visual Basic is kind of a legacy language for us. Classic language, I guess, is the right way to say this, but it still is fully supported. It's been around in the Microsoft ecosystem for a very long time, and it's supported in .NET. So a quick word about .NET as an ecosystem. Is this a technology that you can rely upon? Well, we have 5.3 million monthly active developers using our products. It was marked as the #1 most loved framework for 3 years running there on Stack Overflow, which is a popular technology forum for discussing issues. And you can see some of the other statistics here. One that surprises a lot of people is the performance characteristic as compared to Node.js, which is a JavaScript server-side technology. And we're over 10 times faster according to the Tech Empower benchmarks, a third-party benchmarking resource. Couple more notes on performance, because we all want things to go faster. .NET 5 was our last year release. .NET 6 is what's coming up. .NET 6 releases in 2 weeks. So we are on the precipice of a whole new era of .NET, and the performance has gotten even better than what you see on the screen here. So I look forward to updating this slide with better statistics. But you can see where we rank there against other popular languages like Rust and Go and C++ and Java. Who's using .NET? This is just a small sampling of those that use our products and the products that I'm going to quickly get to a demo here for you. And so if you want to see more of this, go to the .NET customers and check that out. We have case studies, we have videos, we have interviews, all good information there. And if you are interested in learning more about C# and how to use .NET, quickly getting started with it, we have some very simple yet fun videos and learning materials on .NET, and you can follow the learn path there. I wanted to make sure that I gave you something to take away there. Let's talk specifically about what it is that I'm building within the teams that I work with, and that's called .NET MAUI. So this is a multi-platform app UI. It's the ability to have one shared code base, one shared investment of technology and user experience and UI that you can then deliver to Android, iOS, Mac OS, and Windows. These are the four major areas that our customers are interested in. Of course, there's also web, there's also Linux. But this is where we're starting with .NET MAUI, and this is the evolution of a Xamarin product that, like I said, is 10 years old. The framework that we're using is 7 years old. So it's actually quite industry tested, but we're making some significant improvements to it and then giving it a new name, .NET MAUI. And we keep hoping that we're going to be able to go to the island of Maui in Hawaii for the release, but COVID seems to not want us to travel. I don't know what that's all about. So what is .NET MAUI? Like I said, it is targeting these platforms. It is cross-platform application development. We talked to a lot of developers about what would help them to be more productive, and they wanted to consolidate where their focus is in the IDE. So let's give you a single project system. Let's give you the ability to target multiple devices at once. This is what we've come up with. So you can find more information on GitHub, which is the open source kind of world of where we host our projects. And you can see the code. This is more for developers, of course, if you're interested in the code and in the ecosystem and talking about where the technology is going. In addition to this, not everybody is interested in writing fully native applications. Maybe your company invests more in web technology, but you occasionally need to get to the desktop or want to have presence on a mobile device. And so in this case, you would start with Blazor. And Blazor can be hosted inside of a MAUI application. Blazor, as I mentioned at the beginning, is one of our web technologies. And so you can build using HTML and JavaScript and CSS and those things that web developers are familiar with. And then that can be placed inside of a .NET MAUI application. And .NET makes these hybrid applications very different than hybrid applications that you may have seen in the past, where you have JavaScript and then you have native code, and you have to cross a very difficult chasm to get them to interact with each other. In .NET, that's not the case because it's all managed code, and so they can all talk to each other. So your web page that runs inside of MAUI can very seamlessly connect to Bluetooth sensors, for example, and read telemetry off of your device. So you can find out more information about Blazor hybrid apps as well on .NET. And you can see that it runs in a native container, embedded controls. If you've heard of Electron in the past, oh look, I have a countdown timer. If you've heard of Electron in the past, then you'll know that this is very similar to that. The memory footprint is much lower and much faster. So what's a presentation without at least some pretty pictures, right? So what you're seeing on the screen here is the same application running on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android. So this is one of our demo apps, and I can share later, and I will include in the slides, which will be posted to the website, a reference to the GitHub page where you could download this same application and run it yourself from whichever platform you prefer on whatever device that you prefer. So I will quickly do this animation. And you can kind of see how .NET MAUI works. The main thing to emphasize here is that MAUI and .NET are native. They run the same as if you had written Objective-C or Swift for iOS, Java and Kotlin for Android, because we actually bind directly to those libraries from Apple and Google. We have good relationships with them, and we work just like those native applications because it is native. And so if we had time, I would demo, but I am smart and I prepared just a quick video. So this is my coworker, Maddie, just to give you a quick glimpse at what programming with .NET MAUI looks like. She has a plant care application because we all need to know when to water our plants, right? So this application does that. And what you see her doing is coding on a Windows machine directly to her iPhone and her Android device. And so you have the ability to do all of that work just on a Windows machine, and she can code while debugging without changing anything, or without needing to restart and recompile. So this is a highly productive environment where she's able to do that, and this is an area that we are emphasizing more and more. I mentioned this before, .NET Conf comes up in 2 weeks, so mark that on your calendars. Please join us. It's a free online event. It's a full 3 days of not only Microsoft presentations, but also community presentations from around the world of our large open source community. And with that, this is my contact information. If you have any questions or want to have a conversation, I'm on Twitter. That's my email. I would love to talk to you more. Thank you very much. This is awesome. I really appreciate being invited to be with you today.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you. And sorry for the mispresentation. Just that you know, we have the biggest computer science school in the region. We have over 1,000 students every year that we register. And we're about to get the accreditation of the PhD program in computer science. Thank you again.
Invite me to come personally and speak, right? I will be there next time.
Welcome. Let me proceed with a total different area, which is psychology. Professor Dr. Moshe Lanzman is one of the biggest contributors of the establishment of the first psychology department of Kosovo. He sent us his speech by email, and we'll play it right now. It's going to last 8 minutes.
Since we are in a time of elections, it might be helpful to understand the importance of the connection between psychology and political action. All human behavior occurs in context, and a major aspect of context is political. The political context of society demands a significant action component, as Ignacio Martin Baró proposed, that psychology, instead of dealing with what is, should deal with what could be. It is the goal of psychology to understand the process of achieving what could be and applying it to the real world. The philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre believed that in order to live authentically, he or she must be committed, in his terms, engagé. It seems to me then that as psychologists we must commit ourselves to humanizing the world, using every morally acceptable way to further this process. One of these ways is use of the political system. Politics is the art and science of power, and if used properly, it can bring about lasting positive change. We all know, however, that the inappropriate use of power can bring about lasting pain and sorrow. Therefore, the mandate of psychology is, first and foremost, to delineate the legitimate use of power and to discover ways to protect it. We know that Adolf Hitler, arguably the most heinous political criminal of all times, came to power by legitimate means. The role of psychology is to understand when legitimate power becomes illegitimate power and how to create built-in mechanisms designed to prevent this. On a smaller scale, it would be worthwhile to discuss ways that we as psychologists can improve the political climate here in Kosovo. I would like to discuss briefly a few proposals to that end. First and foremost, we should discover ways to encourage people to vote. It is said that the way for evil to triumph is for enough good people to do nothing. What means to promote voting is to start young by encouraging youth to volunteer during elections for whatever political party they prefer. This will encourage them to vote when they become old enough to do so. Another way is to encourage increase of variation among existing political parties and creation of new ones with different approaches. Many people here do not vote because they say that they have no real choice among different parties. Encouraging new ideas by locating people with leadership potential and facilitating their entrance into the political arena will widen the choices and make voting worthwhile. In order to do this, we can initiate leadership workshops and follow up the workshops with work in the field. We can create apprenticeships with political figures abroad and then encourage our potential leaders to enter the political arena under the mentorship of these figures. Next, we can encourage political awareness, educating the public to analyze political material, what Paulo Freire called conscientización. In order to understand more deeply the political issues facing the nation, the more the public has developed critical consciousness, the less politicians will be able to swindle them. Probably the worst plague of the Kosovar political system is corruption. There is a story which I'm sure that some of you have heard about the Kosovar minister who visits his parallel minister in Italy. After a day of meetings and signing of agreements, the Italian invites the Kosovar to dinner at his home. The Kosovar arrives at a luxurious villa and is escorted into a beautiful dining hall. He says to his Italian counterpart, "You must come from a very rich family." And the Italian says, "No, come with me and I'll show you." So they go up to the third floor. The Italian points and says, "Do you see that road?" Kosovar says, "Yes." The Italian says, 10 centimeters of that road is my villa. A few months later, the Italian makes a complimentary visit to Kosovo. After a day of meetings and signing, the Kosovar again invites the Italian to his home for dinner. The Italian arrives at a villa far more luxurious than his own home. He says to the Kosovar that he must be the one with from the rich family. And the Kosovar says, "No, come with me and I'll show you." They go up to the 5th floor, and the Kosovar points and says, "Do you see that road?" The Italian says, "No." The Kosovar replies, "Because that is my villa." The story illustrates the tragedy of corruption. People pour in money, and it goes to the powerful and not to those who need it most. Psychologists can work with the population on how to examine public documents and the press and be rewarded for accurate reporting of the facts. Investigative reporters can be trained and mentored. Although the European Union has not been terribly successful in fighting corruption, there are still places, especially in some countries in Africa, where there has been some success in this front, and we can learn from it. I also can say that it is worthwhile to encourage and educate young people to engage in protest. This can be done through the media, it can be done by demonstrations, it can be done by many ways. It can be done by visiting people who are active in protest and learning from them. Many psychologists shy away from being active in politics themselves or being candidates for important positions. However, in many places in the world, psychologists have been elected to public office. There is not much evidence that a psychologist will be a better politician or that politically active psychologists will be a better psychologist. Still, there is a moral imperative to use whatever knowledge we have for the welfare of society. A psychologist can become involved in politics for many reasons, good or bad. As human beings, we are not immune to the various ills that plague our society. Corruption can especially attract politicians of any profession. But a psychologist contemplating political involvement should not be deterred by what people say of him or her. Martin Baron, who I mentioned earlier, says that the real social change can only be achieved by creating tension. Otherwise, the homeostatic forces will cancel out the change. I might say here that Martin Baron himself paid the maximum price for his involvement in politics. He was the father of what is now known as liberation psychology. and he was murdered by the government of El Salvador 30 years ago. In the past few years, students of the psychology department in the University of Pristina have excelled in their involvement in politics and this sort in engagement. And that is to be commended. For me, this means that psychology in Kosovo has a moral base rare in the academic world. They may succeed or fail in their endeavor, but they are brave to take this leap of faith, and I can only hope that others will follow their example. Good evening.
Unfortunately, we don't have a chance to express our gratitude to Professor Moshe directly since he's not here, but we would like to thank him. Again, we're switching to another area, to civil engineering, and would like to invite the Dean of the Faculty of Civil Engineering Department in Riga Technical University, Professor Dr. Martins Vilinitis, to the stage.
Thank you for this kind invitation, and I hope you could hear me well as well. I hope that you could read my screen, which I showed to you in a few seconds.
Hear you. We can hear you. It's good. It's good.
Yes, so I hope I could start with my presentation. Dear Rector, dear professors, ladies, gentlemen, and participants, it is my honor to present keynote speech in your conference, and I would like to say thank you to organizers for this kind invitation, and in future I hope in fruitful cooperation between our universities. But at the beginning, please accept my apologies, because most probably you heard about the situation in Latvia. We are some sort of lockdown here in Latvia because of this COVID situation. So at the moment I am broadcasting from my home, and so therefore once more please accept my apologies. I try to do my best because it is always a challenge to be as a last speaker in the session, so I will try to do my best to not be boring and to be in a timing. Starting from this September, I was officially appointed as a Dean of the Faculty of Civil Engineering in Riga Technical University. So today I would like to share with you some ideas concerning the challenges in civil engineering education. And I could say that my presentation consists mainly from three parts. At the beginning, I would like to start with some statistics data to better highlight the body of my speech. When I continue with some competencies important for civil engineering education, and I would like to conclude with short final remarks. So as the basis for evaluation, I would like to use supply and demand principle, what is very well known, and on this graph you see what the all supply it's evaluated by 100, but the demand it's changing, so it's changing by the different industries, and for sure this picture differs from country to country, but I hope this highlights the problem. But in some industries, as you could see, there are some more specialists as we really need. And of course, the outstanding demand will be in computing sciences. But as we could see, for engineering and construction branches, lack of employees remain pretty high. So in this example, around 20% more one needed. And as example, I choose the situation, but for better understanding, where you could see an example from Riga Technical University bachelor level study program civil engineering, and the situation with immatriculated and graduated students changed.
Professor, sorry, I think you cannot change the slides. See the first slide that you posted.
Okay, I just stop the presentation and maybe start one more. Sorry. Sorry for this technical. I still on the first slide, yes?
Yes.
Let me share from the beginning. This is the first slide.
It is? It is. Could you please go to second one? Yes, it is working now.
And then maybe I continue with the third.
Okay.
Because the second is just the body of the presentation. Maybe it's not too important not to waste your time, as I promised in the beginning. So the third slide, it's the basis of my evaluation. So I would like to use this, as I say, supply and demand principle. And here you see on the graph, 100% it's choose as a supply in all industries. But the demand, it changes from industry to industry. And for sure, this picture differs from country to country. But I hope this highlights the problem that in some industries, as you could see, there are more specialists as we really need. Of course, the outstanding demand will be in computing sizes when you see 133. But as well, we could see for engineering and construction branches, the number 118, where the lack of employees remain pretty high. And I hope you could read the slide number 4, where I would like to show you for better understanding the situation as an example from Riga Technical University bachelor level study program civil engineering. Of course, the situation with immatriculated and graduated students changes year by year, but immatriculated students, it's mean the blue one, and the our line, it's a graduated student. But overall tendency is still standing, in meaning that the graduated students was around 2 times less than incoming students. And according with our certification institution data, in previous 5 years, certified specialists in civil engineering was around 11,000. In average, if we assume that the working life for civil engineer not exceed 50 years, we could easily calculate what demand for graduate students in 1 year should be around 220. But as we could see from this graph, in previous 5 years, in average were around just 60 graduates from Riga Technical Universities, but we also have some 3 more universities were smaller one Riga Technical Universities. So from those 3 universities, we get some 50 more graduates. So in total, still 2 times less one needed according with demand. So in slide number 5, in my opinion, we could calculate 7 significant duties and skills to characterize qualities of civil engineer, for example, such as consultation of the client, technical inspection of structures, development and examination of a building design, management of the construction process, construction supervision, building information modeling, and the last one I mentioned, the scientific research activities and innovations. Sometimes there are discussions between the structural engineers, project managers, building material production and scientific research institution concerning insufficient knowledges in one or other of previously mentioned fields. In my understanding, the situation when all representatives of building industry are slightly unsatisfied When we mean what the right balance, or I could even say Salomon decision, it's reached. And concerning the assessment of the competences, were always the question how we should evaluate these competences of students in a particular study subject. And as example, I choose also 8 these criteria, which we in our university normally use to evaluate student knowledges. And in total, those components at the end results to 100%. For example, in case I choose the minimum percentage in tests 10%, in exam 20%, individual task 20%, study project 20%, laboratory works 10%, and case study 20%. In total, they all reach to 100%. Of course, this evaluation depends on study course profile, but we use not less than 3 and not more than 5 elements of 8, what I mentioned, to check the student competences. And as the last element, stand with a specific criterion set by a responsible professor. So it means that each professor could set their own specific criteria according to the study course. And then I would like to show you challenges in civil engineering education. I'm not sure what you read my screen as I planned, but still I continue my speech. So as was known, the 3 basic rules in construction industry, and this is the quality.
Professor, we can see you, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. As the foundation of building, I would like to choose quality. This is my first criteria. In my understanding, the time could be stated as body or frame of our structure. And let me compare the costs with finishing works in construction in order to be honest to differences in budget portfolio for European countries. So, but how this refers to civil engineering education, and here you see on the right part of my slide, as a quality, as a quality, I would like to compare this foundation as education, and I would like to propose this quality measure compare with incoming students, and the crucial role plays so-called exact study subjects. In my understanding, this is physics, chemistry, and mathematics. But concerning the time, the second one, we should be as magician looking in the crystal ball and trying to predict 3 or even 5 years in the future. 3 or 5, it means how long is our study programs, 3 or 5 years. And at what time the competences will be needed for civil engineers in the future. And the last one, the costs, it's always staying the financing question, and which unfortunately differs from country to country. Coming back to the final remarks, I would like to point out 3 of them. So it will be on high importance to predict supply and demand for civil engineering specialists in changing environment. The second, we should take care for quality in study process, taking into account decreasing knowledges of students in exact subjects. And the last one, it will be crucial to strengthen the cooperation between construction industry with universities in all of the fields. And here you'll see the question, should we start from kindergarten? On the left hand side, you see the 2 young guys who are building the wall, so the next civil engineers. And on the right hand side, you would most probably recognize me, and those 2 are my twin brothers. So where at the moment we're small, just 3 years old, but in the same time I would like to say that we should take care for our next generation to build up engineering skills in our kids, because what we put in each one of them, we pay back after 15 years. So this is my understanding, and therefore I try to teach my twin brothers as the next civil engineers. And where you could see, this is like advertisement picture from our Journal of Civil Engineering cover, where we just advertising this civil engineer's profession. And still the question remains, what is civil engineering? And at this point, I would like to say thank you for your attention. I am stopped sharing my screen, and I hope you could see me at the moment.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you very much. I would like to invite Professor Dr. Edmond Arizi for the closing remarks. Please.
I just wanted to thank you all, invited speakers, dear professors and colleagues and professionals, for this very great presentations. And I think we get a lot, the reason why it's interesting to have this transdisciplinarity approach. And from myself, I reflect and make a different question when I have presentation from different professors and try to reflect in this dimension that I think is very complex and we have to take care about. And I think tomorrow we have a wonderful day with hundreds of papers and presentation. It's not easy to follow all, but I think it's important to select those who are more interesting directly or indirectly, and we will try to continue with discussion. So again, thank you very much, and see you tomorrow from 9 a.m. when we'll start in parallel session for each conference. And the present participants, we will invite you for a small invited cocktails, and online participants, you can just join us virtually in a virtual cocktail. Thank you very much. All the best.